Trend at the NSE seeming to be downwards, and many saying that they think this trend is set to continue despite the kind of bullish sentiment we have floating about. Your view on the markets right now?
Yeah, we do expect a sort of correction to continue during the month of December. This usually happens as we go towards the Christmas season. And then January, we should see it pick up as anticipation begins for the end of year announcements by the financial sector especially. But seeing the results, we do expect to go back into a very strong bullish period in the first quarter of next year.
Before we get into a few companies that released results yesterday, KPLC still being closely watched ahead of its rights issue. That price set at 19 shillings 50, as I was saying. Hardly surprising then that we're seeing the moves we are seeing on this counter, right?
Well, I think they have quite a big dilution factor between 40 and 50%. And I think that the price at 1950 is, you know, I think it's going towards that price. It's not really half the price, given that they have a dilution factor of that high, But I think 950 is a fair price, and I think that the price will go towards 1950.
To what extent are you pricing in a correction on this counter, given the fundamentals that are supportive of this business at this stage?
Well, the fundamentals are strong, and KPLC has a tendency to surprise. So I wouldn't be surprised if it actually went up. But I do expect it to settle down at around 20 shillings. I believe that we did see that with the Kenya Commercial Bank rights, and I think that's exactly what will happen to this one as well.
In the meantime, as I was saying earlier, we've had shares in the tea-growing companies Williamson Tea and Kapchura really rallying ahead yesterday when their half-year pre-tax profit came in more than doubling. In fact, your overall impressions of those numbers?
Well, the industry is very cyclical in nature. Whenever we have very good weather, then they gain a lot. Kenya is the biggest exporter of black tea, and we've seen them also going out into diversifying into trying to get a bigger market share, within the country. The thing I think is that we should be watching the weather a lot more closely, although sometimes when the weather is bad, they do get some really huge earnings. We saw that happen. The bonuses to tea farmers last year were impressive. But I still think that it is a cyclical area. It's normally for that investor that's looking for short-term investments and should watch out for any slight changes, because the prices can change upwards plus or minus 10 or 20% at any point in time.
To what extent are you buying into the agricultural story on the back of a theme that we've been tracking of late, where we've had these players slowly starting to unlock shareholder value by hiving off property for commercial use?
Well, I think they're now beginning to use the outgrower model rather than doing the growing themselves. I also think that sometimes holding on to too much property gives them more costs in terms of managing the land and managing all these assets, which means that they end up having some sort of higher operation costs, which probably affects them. So I do think that relying on growers is a good thing, although if the prices of tea turned for the worse on the international market, then that is dangerous, because sometimes our growers tend to fail you, and that could be dangerous for the companies.
In the meantime, a CFC Stanbic saying yesterday that 9-month profit came in 54% higher. We had earnings per share up 39% as well. And while net loans to customers were up 19%, the results really reflecting and highlighting growth in non-interest income specifically. Non-interest income up 94%. What's your view on CFC Stanbic right now?
Well, I think this is a trend we have seen across the banking sector. Diamond Trust, Equity, most of the banks are doing quite well. The more conservative banks will tend to do worse. The less conservative will grow much faster in terms of profits. So anybody coming up with new products, we are seeing the Kenyan banked population going for banks that offer the best services, and so we are also seeing non-interest profits coming higher. We are seeing people borrowing more. We are seeing the economy speeding up. And I think as we go into January and as we go into the anticipation, the financial sector per se is going to be the one to watch most closely. And then after maybe towards the middle of next year, we are going to see the other sectors, especially the commercial and services and the industrial, start to pick up as well.
Samuel, just very quickly, looking at that operating expense line, we had operating expenses rise to just under 5 billion shillings. That from just over 3.5 billion shillings. Is that a concern for you?
Not really. I think this is a growth stage, so they need to grow at the moment so that they can have the whatever they need on the ground, so that once they have it on the ground, then that will see the operating expenses begin to reduce. So I don't think it's any source for concern. Usually in a time of recovery and in a time of growth, we find that most companies are seeking the best. They're also seeking people who can drive the growth, and therefore it tends to be a little more expensive, and therefore I think that should happen. Although we have seen those banks especially which already have the network on the ground not seeing increases in operating expenses because they already have had the networks in place, and therefore they're actually just reaping the profits.